Welcome. I'm Kevin. This is Econ B2000 Econometrics here at the Department of Economics and Business in the Colin Powell School, the City College in New York. Personally, I think this class is one of the most fun that I get to teach, so I'm really excited about getting to this. Now, statistics are ultimately used for persuasion. First, we want to persuade ourselves whether there is a relationship between some variables, and next we want to persuade other people whether there is that relationship. Now, sometimes statistical theory can become quite sort of platonic in insisting there's some true ideal coefficient or relationship which could be discerned, some capital T truth. In this class, we will try to keep that sort of discussion to a minimum while keeping the persuasion rationale uppermost. So much empirical work is currently in crisis from well-known empirical studies not replicating, sometimes they're outright fraud. The bottom line for many researchers is that low p-value leads to publication. There might be a few who simply accept that causality, but a lot more would defend a more cynical view that other people believe that, so they got to play along. We'll talk about some of the rationale for why that view became so common over past century of scientific research. Sometimes people's views of research reminds me of Bitcoin mining. In both, somebody starts with a bunch of numbers, processes them through some series of complications that they don't really understand, and then if a certain pattern is discovered, that pattern has value. Whether the pattern is a few low p-values or zeros in a hash. First, I think researchers should be concerned with understanding their data. Now, to understand data, we're going to explore techniques in data visualization. Thus, this textbook will use the textbook, Data Visualization, by a guy named Kieran Healy. You can buy the book, depending on your preferences regarding dead trees, but it's also available online for free, and there's a lot of material on his GitHub page. Data viz requires a basic understanding of stats. Now, some of you are already planning to zone out on all the details and figure that AI will do it. Sweet summer child. AI is not going to save you. AI is really helpful for senior people who can write comprehensive specs, great prompts, take care of all the details. But for people starting out, AI will just crash you in a tree faster if you let it go. The most typical mode that students find is they get a bunch of code that's almost right. Oh, it's so close. Except for the hallucinated package. Something like 40% of AI programs hallucinate key steps or some bit of sideways logic, and then the student doesn't know jack shit enough to get it to actually run. Somebody with experience can look it over, see that all the good parts, and fix the few places where it goes wrong, but you got to become that person with the experience. You got to put in the work. And I know nobody likes to do work, and suffering sucks. But you got to understand the why of it all, even though chunks of the how can be sped up with AI. But you're still left with the how. For statistics, most of that background I'm going to assume is review, so I'm going to go over that material from a relatively high level. This class is meant for students who have a pretty decent background in statistics already. If that's not you, then you got to take some steps to make sure it's going to be you. Now in this class, we're going to be using a computer program called R, and we're going to use R Studio, which kind of sits on top of R like a skin. One of the first things you've got to do is install these bad boys. So how do you do that? Well, you go to that link I put there, and you follow the instructions. Step 1, download and install R. Step 2, download and install R Studio Desktop. I can't give exact instructions since this depends on your operating system and computer setup. I happen to be using a Windows machine. You might have an Apple machine, some variety of Linux, whatever. The instructions are going to be variable for each person. I'd love to give you step-by-step details, but I cannot. So pause here and try it. You can contact me if you're having trouble. I can get on Zoom and help you through step-by-step, but I think most of you know how to install a program or in this case, 2 separate programs, R and RStudio. Once those are installed, you'll only need to open up RStudio, and that will automatically open up R. Now, if you're doing it in the computer lab, if you do not have a computer at home, that's fine. You do it in the computer lab. I mean, it's fine if you got to come to campus, but you open up RStudio in the computer lab on campus. I've put some notes online. Now, when you run RStudio, it opens up, you'll have 4 different panes, and the one we're concerned with is the one where I've drawn that big arrow down at the bottom. That's the important one. The other panes will be useful in a bit, but not right at the start. You can run some commands right there if you want. I mean, alternatively, you can type commands in the window just above that and then run those, where running is basically moving the commands from the top window to the bottom window. Again, there are details in the file that accompanies this video for you. But that's kind of the first step. Now, let's jump to talking about a little bit of why. Let me show a couple of examples for graphs that I've created. Working with the Social Mobility Lab here at the Colin Powell School, I've been looking at different data about the differences in various life outcomes for people with a college degree. This graph shows average wages earned by people with different undergraduate majors. Data in 2021 from the Census Bureau's American Communities Survey. I've picked off 3 particularly high-earning majors: economics, engineering, civil, mechanical, and electrical, and computer science, CS. You can see the typical hump shape of people's wages. I like the graph for the balance between simplicity and complexity. The simplicity is this is not using any fancy model. There's really no econometrics here. It's just looking at the average wage for people of a particular age and major. I mean, there's some smoothing being done, but the bands show the statistical uncertainty, and it's not actually that substantial. But the complexity is, if you look at younger ages, you can see that early on, CS majors earn more, but the other majors catch up and even surpass as people got older. So that combination of simplicity and complexity is meant to entice the audience. That's you. Entice the audience to ask more questions. Why? Why am I seeing this pattern? It looks like economics majors edge out engineering majors. How certain can we be of that? Could there be an issue where CS majors are more likely to, retire early, so their measured wage falls? Now, the graph inevitably muddles different influences. People who are older earned a college degree a couple decades ago versus the people who are younger that got their degrees quicker or more recently. So the difference in that could be not really wage trajectories, but just different influences over time. I mean, I don't know, maybe CS majors are more cyclical. You could make a number of different arguments there. And that's the point, right? To get people thinking about, okay, why might I see this pattern? And then, go on to say, okay, what other data might I want to look at? Now, here's a graph. Again, I got age on the horizontal axis, but this time the vertical axis shows how often the respondents said they were depressed in the last 2 weeks. So here, higher numbers are actually worse. I group people by completed education, whether they have a 4-year degree or more. That's the line there, lower, shifted lower. Or whether they have some college but not 4 years, or just a high school diploma. Those are the 2 lines that are tangled up a bit higher. Again, I think the mix of simplicity and complexity is useful and, again, I hope, kind of intriguing to the audience. We see mental health improves as people get older. All the lines trend down really quite substantially. The separation is also clear. People with a college degree have much better mental health than those without. Although there's less of a gap for the very young and less of a gap for the very old. But that gap is sizable. A college grad who's 30 has about the same mental health as a high school grad at 55 or so. So that should pique questions. Why? Why would I see that correlation? Why is it so strong? What direction might be the causation? Is it that people with worse mental health are less likely to get a college degree? Or is it people who got a degree can attain better mental health? If the latter explanation, is the cost just education? Is it income? Obviously, we know college degrees cost higher income. Maybe that causes better mental health. What other factors are we omitting? What else might be important? Right? A lot of questions that hopefully start to arise. So in this class, in any project, we got to start off by getting some data. So I've put data on the class Brightspace page. There's a link to download the data from the class. So you go to the data tab over there on the left. See the arrow? Yeah, that one over on the left. And then the other arrow on the right is you click to download that file. Now, again, downloading is kind of a pain. Where it goes, depending on your particular setup and operating system, it'll probably get thumped into your downloads folder, which may not be the place you want to leave it, because R looks for the data in a particular folder, and you got to get those matched up. You got to put the data where R will be looking for it. So you got to understand a little bit about the directory structure of your operating system and where your folders are. You got to find your own balance. Now, perhaps you're just starting off. You don't want to make it too hard. But on the other hand, you're going to be doing this for quite a while, so there's opportunity to make sure you do it right. In 3 weeks or something, you don't want to be back like, why did I do that stupid, crappy way when I could have done it better? So, then you go back and redo it. So, to some degree, this is an investment. Now, like I said, everybody's computer is going to be a little bit different. So you load up R, it's going to be looking for files in a particular directory. Minor note, I will interchange the words directory and folder. Those are just the same concept, just different words, different operating systems use different terms. Folder, directory, whatever you want to call it, it's the place where the data is going to be located. R is looking in one place, your data ends up in a different place, you got to make those match up. Now, right at the beginning, you got to understand how these different directories work. Now, fortunately, in RStudio, there are little helper tools you can use. You can just click through, for instance, to load data. There's a menu item for that. But I'm going to show you how to do it with a bit of file commands. So getWD in RStudio tells what folder, WD working directory, it's currently looking at. Then either change where RStudio is looking or change where the data is. Now, it's probably good to have a folder called something like Eco B2000, and then within that, little folders for Lecture 1 or Assignment 1 or Household Pulse Data or whatever you want to call it. And you put the data in there and tell R, hey, look for the data in the following folder. You can click through. You can do this in various ways. It's a multi-step process. It's a slight pain in the ass. But you download the data, you put the data in the appropriate directory where you want R to be looking for it. So then you load up the data and step 1, look at it. We're going to use the household pulse data. In the Great Pandemic, the Census Bureau started doing a bunch of pulse surveys at a high frequency. Every few weeks, they'd go out and ask people a bunch of different questions. Questions changed over time. Different things came priority to know about. This data here combines responses to 14 different surveys done between 2020 and 2024. Has a bunch of demographic information, so we can look, to what extent do some of these other answers depend on factors like a person's education level. Hopefully you find this an interesting data set to work with. Census did a lot of work to put it together. Now, I'd like you to do some thinking about what are some interesting questions. In fact, that'll be part of the first homework assignment. Generally, throughout this class, you want to be considering research ideas. Obviously, it's early. You probably won't have anything clear, but, just indulge your curiosity a little bit. Ask, I wonder if, or I wonder why blank. But you got to understand something about what the data looks like. So after you load the data, you can Through this command, look at just the first 10 rows of the first 6 variables. That's what those square brackets do. This just gets you an idea. Each row represents the answers from a particular person. So that first person in the data is 34 years old, female, college grad, married, income midpoint of $62,500. Now, the household pulse records not the exact income, but people select a band. So this person was in the band for between $50,000 and $75,000 a year. So that number there is just the midpoint of that band. It's an approximation. The next row, row 2, another person, this person age 34, male with some college but not a bachelor's degree, divorced, making $25,000 to $35,000 income, white. In the third row, somebody age 44, etc., etc., etc. Now you can go through all the observations. There are nearly a million. It's going to take you some time. You do not want to read through all of those. Life is short. You want some kind of summary. Hey, you know what? RStudio has exactly that command. Summary, household pulse data, where it'll help you figure that all out. So here's that command. Now you could generally read through the summary. They're reasonably clear about age, and it shows you the average age in the sample. The education measure, pretty common. It asks about the person's education and records the highest level of education they completed. Some people didn't even get to high school, or less than. That's what LT means. Some got some high school. Some people get a high school diploma. Some people, some college, but not a degree. Some completed an associate's degree. Some completed a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree. Marital status includes answers for married, widowed, divorced, separated, never married, and NA for not applicable. Whether for some reason the person refused to answer or gave an answer that just didn't fit any easy category. There are questions on race, if the person's Hispanic, number of people in the household, number of kids and adults in the household, HH being household. If they have private health insurance, public health insurance, what work they do, if they recently lost their job. We have 4 different questions about people's mental health, asking if in the past 2 weeks they felt really down or anxious or worried or they lost all interest in things around them. Now, hopefully you'll find some of these here to be interesting. One of the things we'll do in this class is take a look, go deeper, try to figure out what's going on here. What can we explore more? What can we find out about the world?